Donald Sutherland died on June 20th, 2024 in Miami, Florida, at the age of 88. His passing marked the end of one of the longest, most quietly commanding careers in modern film history. To the world, he was a master of subtle menace and quiet rebellion. The Canadian actor with the chilling eyes, who could shift from war hero to despot, from father figure to villain, without ever losing his edge. But off-screen, the legacy he left behind is just as vast, and perhaps more mysterious. 5 children, born from 2 different marriages. His most famous son, Kiefer Sutherland. What happened to the kids raised under a presence so large, it seems to swallow the room? Below is the story of those children. The first child of Donald Sutherland, Kiefer Sutherland, was born on December 21st, 1966, in London, England, alongside his twin sister Rachel. But from the start, the family portrait was already splitting down the middle. At the time, Donald Sutherland was deep in the ascent of his international career, moving between war epics, political thrillers, and European art house films. His marriage to Canadian actress Shirley Douglas, Kiefer's mother, was unraveling just as their children were learning to speak. By the time Kiefer turned 4, his parents divorced, and Donald left for Europe with a new partner, while Shirley returned to Toronto with the twins. The household Kiefer grew up in had no red carpets, no movie premieres, just a single mother raising 2 kids under the long shadow of a father who only existed in newspapers and movie posters. While Donald filmed Clute with Jane Fonda and cemented his image as the thinking man's icon, his son was thousands of miles away, playing with snow in a small Canadian backyard, unknowingly becoming the first heir to a legacy too distant to touch. As Kiefer moved into his teenage years, the name Sutherland became more of a whisper than a blessing. He'd hear classmates mention his father like a trivia fact. "Did you know your dad's in that new movie with Donald Pleasance?" While he pretended he didn't care. But he did. In private, Kiefer collected magazine clippings of Donald's red carpet appearances and interviews, quietly building a scrapbook of a man he barely knew. At home in Toronto, Shirley Douglas worked as both parent and provider, but it was clear the weight of raising twins alone had left marks. There were no birthday calls from Europe, no bedtime letters, just the occasional second-hand message through friends. "Your father's proud, he's just busy." Donald's face was everywhere, on theater walls, in award lists, in VHS collections, yet never in the doorway. One teacher once asked Kiefer what it felt like to have a famous dad. He didn't answer, but later that day, he ripped a photo of Donald from People magazine and hid it inside a drawer. It wasn't shame, it was distance. And by 15, the boy who once waited by the phone had stopped asking. In its place grew something else, the silent instinct to step onto a stage not to follow, but to prove he didn't need to. By the time he was 20, Kiefer Sutherland had stopped chasing after anyone's footsteps and started carving out his own. He left Canada for Los Angeles with nothing but a head full of Shakespeare, a chip on his shoulder, and a hunger to be seen. Not as Donald's son, but as something sharper, faster, more reckless. His breakout came in Stand By Me, 1986, followed by The Lost Boys, 1987, where he played twisted youth with a calm menace that didn't feel inherited. It felt earned. In fact, Donald remained mostly silent as Kiefer climbed. The two didn't share sets, interviews, or even mentions, and yet, to those watching closely, the resemblance was unmistakable. The heavy eyes, the clipped phrasing, the way they both seemed allergic to simplicity. Hollywood noticed too. But while Donald was still the cerebral giant of film, Kiefer became television's unpredictable powerhouse, especially with 24, where he played Jack Bauer, a counterterrorism agent who tortured his way into cultural icon status. Kiefer didn't inherit his father's career. He detonated it, then walked through the smoke to claim his own stage. But with fame came the spiral. In 2007, at the height of 24's dominance, and with an Emmy freshly polished on his shelf, Kiefer Sutherland was arrested for drunk driving, his 4th DUI. The headlines were merciless. Jack Bauer's real-life crisis. TMZ captured him slumped in his car, eyes glassy, mouth tight, as if even he knew this wasn't just another celebrity mistake. It was a reckoning. He served 48 days in jail, declining special treatment, refusing to make excuses. No statement from Donald. No visit from the man who'd once been just as reckless, just as young, just as stubborn. The tabloids called it a fall, but it was really a mirror, one that reflected the pressure of carrying a name that never held you. Kiefer emerged thinner, quieter, carrying not shame but gravity. That same year, a photo went viral. Him stepping out of court in a black hoodie, cigarette in hand, no entourage, no father, no headlines to soften the moment. Years later, he would admit the fame almost swallowed him. Not the fame he earned, the legacy he couldn't escape. "I didn't grow up in his house," he once said, "but I lived under his shadow." It wasn't an apology, it was an exhale. Today, Kiefer Sutherland stands not as the shadow of Donald, but as the one son who managed to break through it. Actor, producer, country rock musician. His career has crossed mediums and continents, marked not by consistency, but by resilience. When Donald received his honorary Oscar in 2017, it was Kiefer who introduced him on stage. Their embrace was brief, professional, and wordless. A handshake between legacies, not emotions. No tears, no tribute. Just two men in tuxedos, linked by blood and burden. In the years since, Kiefer has spoken less and worked more, quietly touring with his band and returning to character roles in streaming dramas. He no longer needs to explain who he is. The work does it for him. In the final portrait of Donald Sutherland's vast career, Kiefer is the brushstroke that cuts across the canvas. Not matching it, not softening it. He didn't inherit the throne, so he built a different kingdom next to it. The second child of Donald Sutherland, Rachel Sutherland, was born just minutes after her twin brother Kiefer on December 21, 1966, in London. But while Kiefer would go on to become one of television's most recognizable faces, Rachel chose a life that barely touched the spotlight. After their parents' divorce in 1970, both twins were raised in Toronto by their mother, Shirley Douglas. Their father, Donald Sutherland, was already building his international career, filming MASH plus Clute and Don't Look Now. Too busy, too far, too absent. Kiefer responded by chasing the stage. Rachel responded by turning away from it. From early on, Rachel kept her distance from the noise. She never gave interviews about her famous father, never appeared at premieres, never rode the Sutherland name into Hollywood. Instead, she quietly built a respected career in Canadian television production, working as a post-production supervisor on shows like Rookie Blue and Saving Hope. Her name shows up at the end of episodes, not the beginning. No headlines, no chaos, just precision and professionalism. While Kiefer exploded, Rachel refined. She chose structure over spectacle, silence over symbolism. Though the industry always wondered, is she related to? Rachel never confirmed, never denied, and never leaned on it. She lived her life parallel to her family's fame, not beneath it. When Donald Sutherland received his honorary Oscar in 2017, Kiefer was there to introduce him. Rachel wasn't. That wasn't absence. It was decision. She didn't rebel against the family legacy. She simply walked around it. In a house of actors, Rachel became the one who made everything behind the scenes work. And in a family remembered for faces on screen, she's the one name you never saw coming. The third child of Donald Sutherland. Roeg Sutherland was never meant for the screen. Born in the mid-1970s during Donald Sutherland's quieter years in Europe, Roeg arrived at a time when his father was already entering the second act of stardom, older, wiser, and beginning a new life with actress Francine Rosset. They raised Roeg mostly in France, far from the headlines and far from the legacy still looming in Hollywood. Unlike Kiefer and Rachel, whose childhood was shaped by absence, Roeg grew up in the same household as Donald. But proximity didn't mean closeness. It meant exposure. He saw the business up close, the scripts, the deals, the politics, the performances, and quietly Roeg decided he'd rather sit at the table than on the stage. Even as a teenager, he was fascinated not with the actor's craft, but with the ecosystem around it. While other kids idolized actors, Roeg wanted to know who made the phone calls, who secured the funding, who decided which films got made and which didn't. He studied economics and international relations, later earning a degree from Princeton. Not a drama school, not a conservatory. No red carpet photos, no childhood auditions. Roeg Sutherland was building a different empire, and he was doing it without fanfare. By the 2000s, Roeg had become a major player inside the halls of Creative Artists Agency, CAA, the most powerful talent agency in the world. There he wasn't representing actors, he was financing studios. As co-head of CAA Media Finance, Roeg helped arrange billion-dollar film slates, pairing investors with projects in guiding the flow of capital across Hollywood, Europe, and China. His job wasn't about being seen, it was about being indispensable. In an industry obsessed with faces, Roeg mastered the art of being a name behind closed doors. Powerful, low profile, and highly strategic, just like the father he both resembled and rejected. And yet, Donald's influence was always present, if not acknowledged. Roeg didn't carry his father's voice or posture, but he carried his discipline. Colleagues say he's deliberate, sharp, and calm under pressure. Like Donald in his best roles, Roeg chooses his words carefully, waits for the right moment, and never oversells. While Donald used silence as a dramatic weapon, Roeg uses it in negotiation rooms. He doesn't need to be remembered. He needs to be respected. Unlike his siblings, Roeg has never acted, never directed, and never spoken publicly about his family. He rarely appears at events, almost never grants interviews. But his fingerprints are everywhere, from Oscar-winning projects to international co-productions. If Donald taught the world how to command a screen, Roeg quietly taught it how to fund one. And he did it without headlines, without scandals, and without ever asking the industry to care who his father was. Today, Roeg remains one of the most influential people in the film world that most viewers have never heard of. He doesn't need to be celebrated in tribute videos or legacy reels. His legacy is in motion, in the deals still shaping the future of global cinema. He is the Sutherland who chose power over profile, leverage over legacy. In a family of performers, Roeg became the architect, and in doing so, he rewrote what it meant to inherit greatness. The fourth child of Donald Sutherland, Rossif Sutherland, was born in 1978, right when his father Donald was entering the slow burn of a second career peak. Not the explosive fame of MASH or Don't Look Now, but the deeper, darker work of a man aging into gravitas. Unlike Kiefer, who came into the world during his father's meteoric rise and was soon left behind, Rossif was born into something steadier. Raised in Paris and later Canada, he grew up with both parents, Donald Sutherland and Francine Rossette, in a house where cinema wasn't glamorized. It was simply work. But while the cameras were always present, the pressure to perform wasn't. For Rossif, acting was not an escape or a rebellion. It was more like a language he had heard since birth and one day decided to speak. He studied philosophy at Princeton before drifting, almost reluctantly, into acting. His early roles were quiet, thoughtful, even awkward, but there was something magnetic about him. A low voice, a calm stare, and the kind of emotional restraint that pulled you in instead of pushing you back. Critics began to notice. He was clearly a Sutherland, but not Kiefer's type of Sutherland. He wasn't electric. He was elemental. His breakout came in the 2005 Canadian film Poor Boy's Game, and from there he steadily built a body of work that was critically respected but never flashy. River, Backstabbing for Beginners, Hyena Road. He carved his niche not in American blockbusters, but in morally ambiguous dramas, films with blurred lines and bruised characters. In interviews, Rossif speaks like his father, deliberate, careful, intense. But unlike Donald, who often maintained mystery as a shield, Rossif shows flashes of vulnerability. He's admitted to struggling with identity, not as a Sutherland, but as an actor trying to matter without fame. People ask if I'm following in my father's footsteps, he once said, but I'm just trying not to fall into them. He doesn't run from the name, but he doesn't use it either. He walks beside it, respectful but detached. Ross's relationship with Donald was known to be close but quiet. They never performed together, never posed for press. But insiders say Rossif was the one child who most naturally understood his father's intensity. The pauses, the silences, the way both men could say more by doing less. And while Kiefer turned pain into fire, Rossif turned it into gravity. He never became a star, maybe by choice. Fame, after all, had already passed through the family and left scorch marks. What Rossif sought was something cleaner. Art, not attention. Now in his mid-40s, Rossif continues to act, often in Canadian or European films, always choosing substance over spotlight. He lives a low-profile life, rarely photographed, seldom chased. In the legacy of Donald Sutherland, Rossif is the echo, not loud but lasting. He didn't rebel, he didn't retreat. He inherited the craft, stripped it of its noise, and rebuilt it in his own tone. If Kiefer is the storm and Roeg is the architect, Rossif is the monk, the keeper of the quiet tradition. And in a family defined by roles, he may be the one who understood most what it means to live without one. The fifth child of Donald Sutherland, Angus Sutherland, was born in 1982, the youngest of Donald Sutherland's 5 children, and perhaps the one most shielded from both the chaos and the mythology that followed the family name. By the time Angus came into the world, Donald was no longer the wild-eyed radical of Don't Look Now or the counterculture icon of MASH. He was older, steadier, revered. The roles had shifted from lead to mentor, from firebrand to patriarch. For Angus, that meant growing up with a father who was actually present, but also one who was now a cinematic institution. Not just a dad, but Donald Sutherland, and that weight can be oddly paralyzing. As a child, Angus was often seen on sets, watching quietly from the sidelines while his father worked. Unlike Kiefer, whose relationship with Donald was shaped by distance and defiance, Angus saw his father up close, not as a mystery, but as a constant. Yet that closeness didn't translate into clarity. Acting wasn't forbidden, but it wasn't encouraged either. There were no legacy speeches, no demands to carry the torch. Just a shadow that moved silently ahead of him, wherever he turned. In his early 20s, Angus gave acting a try. He took small roles in indie thrillers and horror films, including Harold and Kumar Escape from Guantanamo Bay and Lost Boys: The Tribe. His performances weren't bad, but they weren't distinctive. The camera didn't follow him the way it followed Kiefer or even Rossif. There was no explosion, no defining role, just brief appearances that felt more like experiments than ambitions. Hollywood didn't reject him. It simply didn't see him. And so Angus made a choice. Not a failure, but a pivot. He moved behind the scenes, shifting from actor to producer. In 2010, he co-founded a small production company focused on indie and genre films. Unlike his siblings, he wasn't trying to interpret legacy or compete with it. He just wanted to make things on his terms. As a producer, Angus found a rhythm, helping young filmmakers, investing in modest projects, staying out of the spotlight. It was a quieter success, free from family comparison. There are no viral interviews, no magazine covers, no public moments of tension with Donald. But insiders say Angus was the most emotionally close to their father, not because they were similar, but because there was no rivalry, no distance to cross. He wasn't chasing Donald's legacy, and Donald wasn't pushing him toward it. Their bond was simple, built on respect, not performance. Now in his early 40s, Angus remains active in film production, mostly under the radar. He's the Sutherland most people forget, and maybe the one most content to be forgotten. His legacy isn't built on image or intensity, it's built on quiet autonomy. In a family where others had to fight for space or retreat from the name, Angus found something in between, a way to belong without being consumed. In the end, Angus Sutherland may not be remembered as the face of the family or even its voice, but he was its balance, the still point that proved you don't need the spotlight to carry a name with grace. But Donald Sutherland's story is only one strand in the vast weave of Hollywood legacy, A legacy shaped not just by the films he left behind, but by the lives quietly unfolding in his shadow. Together, they form a lineage defined not by spectacle, but by complexity. A family stitched together by blood, but shaped by distance, privacy, and choice. The Sutherland name will live on, not through headlines or scandals, but in the quiet echo of those who carried it on their own terms. And still, this is just one chapter in a deeper, more fractured history of fame, where the price of greatness is rarely paid by the one who earns it. If you want more stories like this, the ones behind the curtain, beyond the name, subscribe to Legacy Uncovered and join us as we reveal the lives fame tried to forget. Thank you for listening.